They didn't collapse overnight. There was no single protest, no defining speech, no dramatic burning of banners in a public square. Modern feminism, veganism, and socialism didn't die with a scream. They died with a scroll. 1,000 swipes. 1,000,000 lukewarm opinions. They died slowly, quietly, while still insisting they were winning. At the beginning, they meant something. Real pain, real injustice, real hunger for change. Modern feminism was once a loud refusal to accept silence, a demand that women be treated as full human beings rather than accessories to male ambition. Veganism began as a moral question, an uncomfortable mirror held up to industrial cruelty and mindless consumption. Socialism emerged as a desperate response to exploitation, a vision of dignity for people crushed by unchecked power and wealth. These movements were born from empathy and outrage, and for a time, they mattered deeply. But something strange happened along the way. The causes didn't just grow, they mutated. They stopped being tools for liberation and became identities. And once an idea becomes an identity, it stops evolving. It stops listening. It stops admitting mistakes. It demands loyalty instead of understanding. That's when the rot began. Modern feminism, once rooted in equality, slowly replaced justice with performance. It stopped asking hard questions about responsibility and agency and instead rewarded outrage as currency. Victimhood became a competitive sport. Nuance was treated like betrayal. Men were no longer partners in reform but enemies by default. Any woman who questioned the direction of the movement was labeled a traitor, a pick-me, or worse. Feminism stopped speaking for women and started speaking over them. The irony was brutal. In the name of empowerment, it began to strip women of complexity. Women were told they were simultaneously infinitely strong and permanently oppressed, independent yet incapable of accountability. Strength became a slogan rather than a practice. Empowerment became aesthetic. Hashtags, merch, viral clips, while real issues like mental health, family breakdown, and economic vulnerability were sidelined because they were inconvenient. Feminism didn't lose to patriarchy. It lost to arrogance. Veganism followed a similar path. What started as a deeply personal ethical stance turned into a public moral ranking system. It stopped being about reducing harm and started being about purity. If you weren't perfectly compliant, you were the enemy. A person trying to eat less meat was mocked for not going far enough. A struggling family choosing affordability over ideology was shamed. Compassion was replaced by contempt, and the movement that claimed to care most about suffering became remarkably comfortable causing it, socially, emotionally, economically. The messaging grew increasingly detached from reality. Vegan influencers preached from luxury kitchens with access to supplements, specialty foods, and time, things most of the world does not have. Cultural traditions, economic limitations, and health needs were dismissed as excuses. The movement forgot that moral progress doesn't come from humiliation. People don't change when they are attacked, they change when they are understood. Veganism didn't fail because people hate animals. It failed because it forgot humans. And then there was socialism, the most ambitious dream of them all. A promise that no one would be left behind, that work would be dignified, that wealth would serve society instead of consuming it. But instead of learning from history, modern socialism tried to rewrite it. Every failure was blamed on, not real socialism, every success of capitalism dismissed as luck or exploitation. Hard questions about incentives, corruption, and human nature were waved away as propaganda. Online socialism became a lifestyle brand. Slogans replaced solutions. Complex economic systems were reduced to memes. Anyone who questioned feasibility was accused of being a corporate shill or morally bankrupt. The movement stopped producing builders and started producing critics, experts at tearing down systems, hopeless at creating new ones. Socialism didn't lose relevance because people stopped caring about inequality. It lost relevance because it stopped offering believable answers. What connects all three isn't ideology, it's behavior. These movements didn't die because they were wrong in principle. They died because they became hostile to the very people they claimed to represent. They mistook moral certainty for moral superiority. They confused visibility with victory. They forgot that movements survive on trust, not intimidation. Social media accelerated the decay. Algorithms rewarded outrage, not wisdom. The loudest voices weren't the most thoughtful, they were the most extreme. Subtlety doesn't go viral, rage does. And so the movements radicalized themselves in pursuit of attention, mistaking engagement metrics for progress. Every disagreement became a war. Every question became an attack. Eventually, ordinary people, working parents, students, laborers, quietly stepped away. They didn't announce it. They just stopped listening. The public didn't reject feminism, veganism, or socialism because they were evil. They rejected them because they became exhausting. People don't want to live under constant accusation. They don't want to be told they are monsters for being imperfect. They don't want movements that demand obedience instead of growth. When ideology becomes a courtroom and everyone else is always on trial, people leave. The saddest part is that the original problems never went away. Gender inequality still exists. Environmental destruction is still accelerating. Economic injustice is still real. But the movements that once fought these battles lost credibility by prioritizing ego over impact. They chose ideological purity over practical change. And when that happens, even good ideas become useless. We killed them, not with opposition, but with excess. With absolutism. With moral bullying disguised as virtue. We turned living movements into rigid doctrines, then acted shocked when they shattered under their own weight. The irony is painful. In trying to control the narrative, they lost the story. What replaces them isn't clarity, it's confusion. Into the vacuum rush cynicism, apathy, and reactionary thinking. When people lose faith in reform movements, they don't magically become wiser. They become bitter. Distrust grows. Polarization deepens. And the space where meaningful progress once lived becomes a battlefield of extremes. But death doesn't have to be the end. Ideas can be reborn if people are brave enough to admit failure. Feminism could rediscover humility and complexity. Veganism could return to compassion instead of condemnation. Socialism could grow up, confront reality honestly, and evolve instead of repeating slogans. But that requires something these movements currently resist: self-criticism. Until then, their names will continue to exist, but their power will fade. They will survive as aesthetics, not engines of change. As identities, not solutions. And future generations will look back and ask how movements born from empathy became symbols of division. The answer will be uncomfortable. Because it wasn't them versus us. It was us. They told you these movements were unstoppable. That questioning them made you ignorant, immoral, or dangerous. But what if the truth is darker, and closer to home? What if modern feminism, veganism, and socialism didn't fail because of opposition, but because of the people who claimed to defend them? If you're ready for a story that challenges narratives, breaks illusions, and forces uncomfortable honesty, subscribe now, because the conversations no one wants to have are the ones that matter most. If this story made you uncomfortable, good, that means it worked. Don't scroll past it. Share it with someone who thinks differently than you. Argue about it. Reflect on it. Question your own assumptions. Real change doesn't come from silence or slogans, it comes from courage and conversation. Subscribe, comment, and stay engaged, because the future won't be shaped by echo chambers, but by people brave enough to think for themselves.